I remember that cup final for many reasons. Jimmy Melia was, a great. He was a showman, but I also
Yeah.
remember they went by helicopter,
Unbelievable.
British Caledonian, and you think this is a bit exotic, isn't it? Helicopters, that was something that no one ever got on helicopter. And I remember them flying in. You went, oh wow, this is something that you have never seen before. A team in a helicopter, and then it went from there. And obviously, it was a great final because it was 2-2. And then the other thing about that final, which unfortunately for him is probably the reason most people remember him, and Smith must score
Yeah,
when
yeah,
he
yeah,
failed to beat Gary Bailey. But I think that cements the idea because it was Peter Jones, wasn't it, who came up.
yeah, yeah,
And there are certain bits of commentary which absolutely put you in that
yeah,
position, even though it was
yeah,
1983. I can remember it
yeah.
absolutely crystal clear. So that is, for people in the media, I mean, for you and I'm a writer, I'm not a comment, but that must be something so good, and Aguero, and they think it's all. Those are the bookmarks of football history, and it's so great to just have it, and it's not scripted. It's just you
And
can't
that's the
script
key.
that.
I mean, you had I mean, I commentated at the start of my career. I don't know, obviously,
Yeah,
Darren, you had last week's commentator. I would suggest, from my perspective, the instinctive ones are the ones that are the best and they're remembered, not the scripted ones, And obviously, I think it's all over is not for obvious reasons, nor is that Smith must score. Just where it is, you feel the moment and you occupy the moment, and it's what everybody else is thinking. Absolutely.
yeah.
I was talking about the helicopter ride the other day with somebody quite recently. We were like, and we said, what would have happened if the helicopter had gone down? I mean, literally,
Yeah.
how could you have allowed the helicopter? How could you have allowed the team? I mean, I wouldn't want to be macabre. We were just thinking, like, how could you have allowed that? I mean, that's
I know.
nuts, isn't it?
It is crazy. So
But
yeah,
the other thing about Jimmy Melia, Richard, sorry, I
mm,
was at Liverpool last week in the cup tie, and
yeah,
Lewis Kumas scored on his debut. Lewis
of
Kumas,
course, yeah,
Jason Johnson's
Jason
son.
Gibbons, yeah,
Anyway, we have brilliant statisticians. So John was on stats, just sending me thing going. He's the fourth youngest player to score in his Liverpool debut. Michael Owen's the youngest.
okay.
Jimmy Melia was in that, and I went, Jimmy Melia. I went, yeah,
Was he?
Jimmy Melia. Yeah, yeah, I know.
Okay.
Brilliant.
It's
His
like when,
dancing shoes. You remember his white dancing
oh
shoes?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's just, it is amazing. You suddenly find out about people. So I was doing a piece about George Best because it was sort of, it was 50 years since he played his last game for Man United. And there was this ridiculous thing where he actually turned out for Dunstable Town after he'd left United. And the manager of Dunstable Town was Barry Fry, who could
Yeah.
persuade a lot of people to do things. Barry Fry was at Man United's academy with George Best, which
Yes.
I had never realised before. And I just went, was he really? And those sort of things. You go,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
so there is this history which because so many people don't quite make it when they've
Yeah.
started
Yeah.
as a youth player. But there is something in there. There's a film in there about digging up people's past and actually saying, well, he could have been alongside George Best as a player. He wasn't, but then he moved on to other things. And Jimmy
Yeah. Yeah.
Melia, similarly, I bet he was with, as you say, with some amazing players at the Liverpool youth system, and then didn't quite make it as a player and went on to be a manager.
I think what I love about the Bright is what has happened. So that game in 1978, I was 10, so I'm now
Yeah,
56. So that's 46. I mean, in that time, so they went from there to obviously reaching the cup final, all but winning the cup final,
yeah,
then getting. Did they get relegated that season or the next season? They
yeah.
got
No, it
relegated
was that
almost
season.
immediately.
That
That
season they
season they
went
got
down.
relegated.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so they were trying to do what Wigan went on to do, which is win the cup and get relegated.
yeah,
And then they went all the way back down to the bottom. And I remember I think it was just before I started doing sport on Five, sort of Five Live Sport on a Saturday
yeah.
afternoon. They had the game at Hereford, and Pat Murphy, who obviously worked with for hundreds of years, Pat was there, and I'm like, Pat, I watched Brighton in the old First Division. Now they're a game away from going out of the league.
Yeah.
So they went all the way down. Obviously, the whole leaving the Goldstone, the Whitby Stadium, playing at. What did they
Gillingham.
play? Gillingham.
Gillingham.
If anybody who lives in Manchester thinks Gillingham's next to Brighton, I promise you it's not.
No, it's not.
And like everywhere in this country, east-west roads are crap. North-south ones aren't much better, but unless it's the M4, east-west is terrible. So to go from there and now to see where they are and to see the way that they're run and to see, I mean, Tony Bloom is a complete genius and all of his algorithms are off the scale. You know, where are Brighton going now? We're speaking now, they're about to go to Rome, aren't they? I mean, I know they have a bit of up and down season. They're about to go to Rome. I mean, Brighton were playing at Edgar Street against Hereford probably 25 years ago to stay in the league. Now they're playing Roma in the European League. I mean, it's just remarkable, absolutely remarkable what they've achieved. I mean, it's a million miles away from Teddy Maybank and Chris Catlin and Andy Robbins, but I mean, it just shows it's possible. It just shows it's possible if you obviously you want to know he's got some money, but it's not his money, it's his running of it, isn't it? It's his stewardship. It's the people he surrounds himself with. It's his delegation. It's his choice of coach and the next coach and the next. And listen, he'll have chosen the next one already, Richard, won't he? He'll have chosen probably chosen the one after that already as well.
Well, it's quite rare in football to have a succession plan, which seems very weird considering how quickly things change in terms of managers. We've even now got focus on directors of football as they move around. But it's always struck me as really odd how when a manager gets sacked or leaves, suddenly they start scratching their heads and go, oh, who are we bringing in next? Whereas Brighton are a perfect example of that, where they know, as you say, probably 2 steps, 3 steps in advance who they're going to get in. And, they know the players they need and they buy them early. And this seems to me, I have never got anywhere near running a football club. I never will. But it seems to me weird why you wouldn't do that. And I just don't understand the sort of mentality behind just going, oh, no, the manager's left. What are we going to do now? Just assume it's going to happen and actually do some planning. I don't know. It's just maybe that's complete.
Should we also not touch on the fact that with Alan Mullery there, this is is this not the crux of the Palace Brighton angst? Alan Mullery. Yep. Is this not where it actually all starts?
It is. It is. To explain it, I mean, they call it the A23 derby. I grew up on the other end of the A23, near Purley. So the main reasons are, we used to be in the same division. So for the game you saw, which they'd just been promoted, Palace had been promoted alongside Brighton. And funnily enough, the following season, when Brighton went up, so did Palace. So there's this sort of toing and froing and always being in the same division and, either at the bottom or the top. And then we went down, they went. But it was Alan Mullery in an FA Cup replay, actually at Stamford Bridge when they had FA Cup replays. And it was a very feisty game. And he, at the end of the game, because I think there was a controversial penalty, whatever it might be, he got a £5 note, remember those? And he ripped it up and said, "You're not worth that," to the fans. And someone poured a coffee on him, and it basically stemmed from that, the fact that we were always at the same level. The other thing is Malcolm Allison changed Palace's nickname from the Glaziers, for obvious reasons, because of Crystal Palace, to the Eagles, because he liked it. It was a bit more jazzy, Benfica, all that sort of stuff. Brighton had been the Dolphins, and guess what? They changed their name to the Seagulls just after we changed our name to the Eagles. So there are lots of different strands of this rivalry, but that explains it. But the Mullery incident is definitely, and then of course, ironically, Mullery became our manager, which didn't go down that well with some of the hardcore Palace fans. But there are lots of other issues, but that was the main thrust of it. When a manager disrespects the fans, I think that can, basically
Yeah.
fund a rivalry for a long time. So, and it's just developed, So we quite like having them as right. We don't want Millwall or Charlton because they're not really on our radar. Sorry. And so Brighton are our rivals, and
I have to
long
say,
may it
I did
continue.
see your team of the. I did see your team of the '80s at Selhurst Park playing Arsenal once. I was like, no, actually, Dad must have taken me to that. I've just remembered another game, and it was two. I don't know whether you remember it. It was 2-2. It was about Boxing Day, and what I remember most of all was that I know this sounds a strange sentence. Willie Young scored an overhead kick, and it was disallowed. Really? It was disallowed. Oh. I was out. Thank goodness VAR wasn't around. Or maybe it should have been. I don't know. I was apoplectic. I'm like, what do you mean he's disallowed it? For dangerous play or whatever it was. It's like the fact that a Scottish centre half can get up that high and do an overhead kick.
Yeah.
But that was your team of the '80s.
Team of the '80s. We went top of the first division after beating Ipswich 4-1, but we're not here to talk about Palace, unfortunately. But what I wanted to also spin back on is something you mentioned there when you talk about Norwich and how you had you quite like them because they're great kit, yellow and green. Which is the other thing about going to your first match, I think, is the kits. So suddenly you got everyone, because when you play football as a kid, probably don't have quite the same kit. It's all a bit raggedy. But then suddenly, in the old days when there was black and white television, you'd never see the colours. Then suddenly there are these colours. And, Brighton's colours were blue and white stripes, blue short, which they pretty much are today. I mean, obviously plastered with advertising, logo, sponsors, arms, whatever it might be. But did that hit you and go, that kit sort of remains in your head as that was one of the first kits I saw?
Absolutely, because also you couldn't buy kits that easily in those days.
That's true. Yeah.
There used to be a department store in Tunbridge Wells called Weeks. I think it was called Weeks. I'm pretty sure it was. You couldn't just wander into Weeks and say, "Can I have a Brighton kit or an Arsenal kit or a Liverpool kit?" You really couldn't.
No.
It was quite hard to get hold of kits in those days. So when you did see them, they really did stand out. And I think that's why I did have a Norwich. I had a Norwich shirt. I remember now, yellow with green cuffs. I mean, goodness knows why. But they were so striking. So I think in a way now, my son upstairs, mid-20s now, he's got probably 100 football shirts, which, I picked up when I went to watch Atletico Madrid when he was 15. I just buy one because it was fun, because you could. It was easy. Yeah. You didn't have to, probably a knocked off one. But mid-70s, you couldn't just wander into a shop. Probably had to send off to the club for one or something. I can't remember, but it wasn't easy, which you'll remember. So absolutely, it hits you. It hits you in the face, that kit or an England kit. We went to one England game at Wembley. That absolutely that strikes you between the eyes.
Yeah, I remember, as you say, we said before, you've guested on my stablemate Theo Delaney's live goals, and that you talked about the England kit, the Admiral one, with the red and blue, which was one of the great kits. I mean, some of the kits haven't been so great, but that was a fantastic kit. And actually that leads us to, because I quite often in this podcast talk to people about their first ever international as well. And so I'd like to dig a little bit further into that. So remind us of what your first international.
Well, this was really significant because, of course, today's boys and girls, if they're English, are spoiled. England always qualify. Yeah. But I was born in 1968, so I don't remember 1970. I vaguely remember 74, but England didn't qualify. I very much remember 78. England didn't qualify. So, by the time the qualifiers started for Spain 82, I'm 12. England in my lifetime have played in Euro 80 and the fans rioted. And England, remember England, they rioted against Belgium off the top of my head. So, England, Kevin Keegan was a hero of mine growing up because he was England captain. But England were rubbish in that sense. So Dad said to me, "Okay, let's go to a game at Wembley." So this is a couple of years after the game we're talking about at Brighton. So we went to the first game of the qualifying campaign, and obviously because I've used this word before, and actually it's really appropriate with sport at the moment. We went to England-Norway at Wembley. There was massive jeopardy because England didn't qualify for the last two World Cups. It's not like now we might qualify. They hadn't. Who was manager? Ron Greenwood was manager. Yeah, that's right. Ron Greenwood was manager. Obviously, this is the irony that talk about 1980. So England have had the European champions for the last how many of years they've had it for? 3 years by that stage. 70, about Liverpool and Nottingham Forest. I know Liverpool had a lot of Scottish players, but there was a lot of fantastic footballers. Talked about Trevor Francis earlier. So we went to Wembley, and it was a massive deal. It was and of course that would have been live on television. What I remember most of all was the huge Wembley scoreboard. The individual, the names of either the countries or the players who scored were picked out in little light bulbs, which made their names up. So you can imagine. So your name Foster, the light bulbs would be appropriate. Terry McDermott scored from the penalty spot, and the light bulbs kept failing on his name. So, sometimes McDermott would have 1T, sometimes 2, sometimes 1.5, which of course just made the crowd laugh every time. There was a huge cheer as his name came up, and then as all the light bulbs failed. But they won that. I mean, they won that 4-0. And you think, oh, well, all is well and good. But if people don't know, that was the most extraordinary qualifying campaign so they beat Norway 4-0. The reverse is the famous Norway, your boys took one hell of a beating. That is the Miss Maggie Thatcher. Are you listening?
Winston Churchill,
Winston Churchill, Lord Beaverbrook, Lady Diana.
Yeah, she did.
England,
she was in
England
that.
lost there, and then they lost to somebody else. I think maybe Switzerland, and they had to persuade. Ron Green was going to resign. They had to persuade him not to resign on the way back. Or they lost they lost somewhere else as well. And then a result went their way. And then I remember the game where they qualified. They had to beat Hungary at Wembley, and that was like, this is a massive deal. I've never watched England in the World Cup. My generation had never watched England in the World Cup. And they won 1-0. Paul Mariner scored, who I got to know really well. Lovely man, God rest him. And they went there. But Wembley, it was full Wembley that night. I was absolutely. But international football is an interesting one. Our crowds for international football, Richard, are astonishingly good. They are the envy of Europe, the crowds that turn up to Wembley. They are the envy of Europe. You compare our crowds to who go to watch other games, even if you think, well, England will always qualify. So, but then with that level of jeopardy, and my dad, God bless him, he went, right, we need to go to one match. We didn't go to another one, pretty certain we didn't. But we went to one. He said, yep, we'll do that. 4-0. It's North Circular. Being a Londoner, he was like, well, being a Londoner, and he was brilliant like you are, he was brilliant at like, Dad, what's up? Well, we're going to leave here because we're going to go through M25. No M25 in those days. He loved going through the Elephant and Castle. We'll go through the Elephant and Castle. We'll go around there. We'll pick up the North Circular around the top. I went, okay.
just pull our car in here. No one will notice. And the contrast, you see, that's what I think is interesting. So when you've gone to, the Goldstone ground, and then suddenly you go to Wembley, which is 100,000, would have been 100,000 then, it's 92,000 now. That is, again, an extraordinary experience because, I went to Selhurst Park quite a lot of times, and then your first entry into Wembley, and you go, oh my God, this is massive. I mean, the old Wembley, we remember, is not particularly great ground for sight lines, but it was just this huge expanse, and it just, you walked up to it, and obviously those were the days when you had the twin pillars, but the towers. And now we've got the arch, which, funny enough, where I live, I can see because it's only 1.5 miles away, just over my shoulder here. That again, the strong experience of that, and seeing, I don't know, they go on about the Wembley pitch being huge. I actually don't, the dimensions aren't that different to some, but it's just got so much space around it, and it just feels enormous. And so you were what then? You were 10, did you say?
I was 12.
You went?
I was 12. Oh, no, you're right. It was fast. And actually, fun enough, I was at Coventry last week for their cup tie with Maidstone. So obviously we were showing on ITV a lot of Coventry's goals from 87 to the Tottenham final. And I said to Mark, the editor, and who's a Palace fan, I said, Mark, The old Wembley looks okay. Before we get on to the dimension, the pitch looks so much bigger than today. And I'm sure you're right, it's not. But what the old Wembley was, of course, because it had originally the dog track, it had a lot of
Yes.
space behind the goals. So the old Wembley's footprint was enormous, enormous. And I do recall that very clearly going, blimey, Dad, this is huge. As I say, we've been to Lords, which is wonderful, but very small. Lords is a very small sports stadium, 27,000. Twickenham, the old Twickenham was reasonably big, but Wembley was enormous. I mean, properly enormous. And I know it got a bit decrepit, but for me, it had a fantastic vibe to it. It had a wonderful feel. I'm not saying we didn't need to rebuild it because, it was appalling for women. It was barely a loo for women. The facilities were pretty awful. So I'm not being I'm not being an old fart and going, we should have left it alone because we couldn't. But in terms of how it felt, I thought it was fabulous. I thought it was absolutely fabulous. And when you're a 12-year-old and you're watching England and it's full, and the reason I keep using this word jeopardy is because at the moment. I went to the Irish are going to love me for this. I went to the Aviva Stadium last week for the Six Nations. There was no jeopardy in the crowd at all. There was no sense of jeopardy because the Irish knew they were going to beat Wales because they're so good. Right. There would have been yesterday at Man City for the derby. Well, we've been recording this off the Manchester derby, but often you go to the Etihad. There's no sense of jeopardy because Man City are so good. And in a sense, I feel that's a bit of a shame for people because you need that. Are we actually going to win? My stomach is in knots. Are we going to win? This is so important. And going to Wembley that night was like, we haven't been in a World Cup since 1970. This is absurd. Whether, for better or for worse, we're England and we're the cradle of football. And this is Wembley. How can this be? How can this be? The papers were full of it, weren't they? They're full of it, 78, we'd lost out to Italy, hadn't we, in our qualifying? We'd actually beat them at Wembley 2-0. I remember that really clearly. But we lost out because only one team qualified. So that jeopardy was so you could latch onto it in literally 100,000 England in their smart white kit. I was, and even though I obviously didn't play for my team, I was a massive Kevin because he was England captain. I loved Kevin Keegan. I was desperate for him to play in a World Cup. We all know he played for 20 minutes, sadly, or whatever it was, 25 minutes, as did Trevor. Yeah. As did Trevor.
I mean, the 1982 World Cup, we didn't lose a game. But, the first, I think I'm right in saying the first country not to lose a game and get knocked out, which happens more nowadays because it's much more convoluted in the groups and all that sort of stuff. So that's brilliant. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of last things. So you mentioned your first professional, so that you're going, doing radio commentary. Can you remember that game at all? Was it something Again, you said it was at the Goldstone ground.
I was I was asked to write about this the other day, actually, for a Fulham publication because it was at Craven Cottage. I remember it very clearly. So I think it was Division 3, August 1991. I was working for LBC, who are obviously a massive station now. Then had a very strong sports department. They've sort of obviously long since opted out of the sporting world, but they then had a sports department which equaled Capital Gold. You're a Londoner, which equaled Radio 2 as it was, and local radio. So that's where I started. So very clearly, again, especially Craven Cottage, because it's a wonderful ground, and walking through Bishop's Park and sunny day, obviously, because it's August and the sun's out, and I'm one of those people who often has an affinity to various places or things or clubs for a lot of reasons. So Brighton for obvious reasons, Fulham for this reason. My sister lived around the corner at the time, one of my sisters. And it's just such a lovely ground. I mean, and I have great affection for Fulham fans because they have football in the right perspective, in my view. They just really love going to Craven Cottage and watching a good game. And some of them will accuse me of being terribly patronising. I actually think they've got it right. You know what I mean? They love it. One of my best mates support Fulham. He just, sometimes he says to me, I'd rather we were in the Championship, but not this season because they're doing well, rather than just coming 6th. So they lost 1-0 at home to Birmingham. I saw work the other day. Simon Morgan, who was the Fulham captain that
Oh
day,
yes, yes,
he works
yes.
for the Premier League now. And I looked up who was the manager. Don Mackay, the Scotsman, took over as the manager. But I just
Oh yeah.
it's the same. It was the same. It was the same feelings actually as the Brighton game, which was only what was it? 13 years earlier. The
Yeah,
green grass and the senses. Only this time I had a microphone and kit, and and
yeah.
I'm the conduit for everybody listening who supports, well, for everybody, not just the Fulham and Birmingham fans, as to what was going on in the Johnny Haynes stand, which is still just as wooden as it was then.
Yeah, it's amazing. Considering, they developed the Riverside stand and it's,
Yeah,
all
yeah, yeah.
very, very, but then you've still got the other one and then you still got a funny little building in the corner,
Oh, I know.
call it the
Yeah.
cottage, whatever it is. It obviously, they can't touch it because it's listed, but it's just it's such a great ground. I absolutely love going to Craven Cottage. You're right. It
And
is one of the
in the
grounds.
days of Mohammed Al Fayed, you'd always get a Harrods pie in the press room. You'd always get
Nice.
a Harrods. You would now, but you always did in those days. Lovely little dinky loos as well in the concourse. It
Yeah.
was great. It was absolutely great. I mean, Birmingham won 1-0. I remember that.
Right. Okay. And two last questions, and it's been
Richard,
fantastic
sorry, the
to
dogs have
talk to
done.
you.
Can you stop 1 second? The dogs have done brilliantly. Let me just check they're not
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Go,
interrupting
go.
somebody. What? Who are you barking at? Stop barking. No. Okay. Sorry, Richard. Right.
No problem. No
Two
problem.
last questions. Yep.
So,
Okay.
when you go, you do a lot of comment. You present a lot. Do you still get the chance to go to games where you're not there professionally, and do you enjoy it because you can just go as a spectator?
The honest answer to that is less in football. I mean, lots in cricket, lots in cricket and racing, particularly. Football, I don't tend to. I mean, a friend of mine's a season ticket holder at Liverpool, the ones I
Right.
take the mickey out of, and he said, "I'll ask you to Anfield any day you want, but you really want to go all the way to Anfield and watch a football match?" And he's, to be fair to him, he's got a point. He's got a
Yeah.
point. I'd rather. So very occasional, not very often, is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I don't want to go, but I don't look for it. But I love going to cricket and to racing or to rugby and not have a microphone in my hand. I'm very, very happy there. I'm very happy there. And I probably will go to more football as I get a bit older. But at the moment, I think, when you're working on it so much, I think I always say this, and you may feel the same. And I say this to all the 21 and 22-year-olds, boys and girls who want to get into our business. Look, it's a fabulous business, but if football's your thing, when your hobby becomes your job, it changes your relationship with it. And you have to accept that. You have to accept that you know how the sausage is made. So you're not going to don't be shocked by, really, is that what football's like? And also, don't come into this business if all you care about is Man United winning, because you won't be able to do it. You've got to be able to do this job impartially, dispassionately. Not saying you can't have a team, but but you have to be able to put that in a box and leave it till you're at home and watch the game, not when you're working on it. So I think so much of my life is invested in football professionally that when I've got time off, going to a football match isn't the first thing on my mind. And I don't mean that because I'm not loving the game still. It's just, you need a break from it sometimes, don't you? So, I could go to 5 days of a test match. Oh, my word, I could be the happiest man on the planet. You know what I mean? Leave me there or go. I'm going to Cheltenham next week for a day. Can't wait.
Yeah.
Absolutely can't wait. And that's that. You know what? That's fine for me. That's absolutely fine for me. Or I go and watch my son play football a bit when I can, or I'd like to go and watch a bit more local football, whatever. I have a great affection for non-league football, and I think it's got a huge part to play going forward because of the expense of top-level football and so forth, and the expense of, let's be honest, the expense of watching football even at home with subscription channels. So I'd like, I think that's probably what I'll do as much of as I go forward.
Brilliant. And my final question is, Have you ever taken someone to their first game? So you might have taken, your son, your daughters, your wife to their
Yeah.
first game?
I took my son. Taken my youngest daughter. Pretty sure I took her to her first game at the City Ground, which she really enjoyed. But the
Right.
funniest one was I took my son. The last season of Highbury, I took him to Highbury, so he was probably 7 or 8, and they were
Yeah.
playing West Ham,
Hmm.
and West Ham were 2 up at half time, and Sol Campbell was having a nightmare. You might guess where I'm going here. So as we go
Right.
down for a drink at half time, Sam, who's age 7, said, "Dad, I think they'll take Sol Campbell off at half time." I went, "Sam, you don't take off England's centre half at half time
No.
because he's not having a very good half. He's had a terrible half, but that's the game.
Yeah.
He's got to make up for it in the second half." As we
Yeah.
sit down in our seats for the second half, the PA announcer, Arsenal substitution at half time. Whoever it is, number 5, Pascal Seagon, for
Yeah.
number 4, Sol Campbell. And he looked at me as if to say, "I thought you were some Charlie who knew what you were talking."
That's lovely.
Yeah, and you remember Sol Campbell? I think he went off to Waterloo and got on Eurostar or something at half time, didn't he? That was the story. And I think he left the
Yeah.
ground. I mean, he sucked. So I took him. I took him to his first game. Did I take my wife? My wife doesn't come from a sporty family. It's quite a sporty
Right.
family now. Don't
Yeah.
think I took her. My mother would not want to go to football in a million years. But
Yeah.
so my
Okay.
son at Highbury, I'm pretty sure my youngest took to the City Ground with friends. Actually, yeah.
Brilliant. So, there's a nice dichotomy there. So, one of the first games you went to, your dad fell asleep, and then when you
Yeah,
took your son, he was telling you what was going to happen. You said absolutely
yeah,
no
yeah.
chance, and it did happen. So that's nice.
Yeah,
Is there
exactly.
one last thing? Is there anything particularly that is an abiding memory from that game, from that first match, that you will always say that is the point at which I got it?
Well, I think as in I got football, as in the football experience. Well,
Mm.
I was pretty certain that I would because I love football so much, and it my because my dad wasn't a football nut. I love football so much. As my mum used to say a lot about a lot of people, um, and she would have said this about me. That's just the way I came out of the egg. I just came out of the egg loving football. I mean, there was nothing in my family, but my dad's family particularly, or her family. So it wasn't so much, am I going to like this? I was absolutely
Yeah.
certain I was. I think just looking back on it, it was just a shared experience with my dad, and there weren't so many of them afterwards. I think
Hmm.
certainly in terms of football, there were plenty in cricket, but certainly in terms of football, which I often think would probably make him smile a bit when if he could have. If he could have lived to see what I did for a living, I think he might have
Yeah.
thought, "Oh right, okay." So that obviously did have a massive impact on you, in a
Sure.
way that maybe might have even surprised him a little bit how much it did. But it just, I always had a lot of fun with him and those shared experiences, whether it was football or going to Lords or going
Yeah.
racing. He was great
Hmm.
company. We had a load of fun together, and with my mum and my sisters. But as that father, purely in that father-son
Yeah.
relationship was really special, really important, and it's important for all of us. And can I reiterate today? Of course, the great thing is that would be as much father-daughter as father-son. It was a little different in the 70s because it was a little different in the 70s. Let's not pretend.
Yeah.
Let's not pretend otherwise. My sisters weren't particularly interested in football, but they both happen to have married massive Chelsea fans, and I've got Chelsea nephews coming out of my ears.
Oh dear. Well, I'm sorry to hear
No, no,
that.
no. Very, very entertaining WhatsApp group. In fact, I have
Oh
to tell you,
yes,
it's
I can
quite funny.
imagine.
So we have a big family WhatsApp group, and then both my sisters said, "Right, you boys, you're going to have a subsection WhatsApp group, a separate one, which is just for football, because we don't need to hear the bickering between you lot."
Yeah, it does go on a bit, doesn't it? And that's the
Yeah,
point. It's endless. It's just
yeah, yeah, yeah.
every week,
Oh,
midweek.
everything. But
Brilliant.
so I think those shared experiences are so important.
Mm.
So important. And I take I love going racing with my daughters. I take my daughters to test cricket. I try and take
Yeah.
one of them each time, just me and one of them. It's
Okay.
great.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Fantastic.
You know,
Yeah.
that as much as the sport or the result, it's just a shared experience, which is so memorable.
Absolutely. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today, Mark. And I know I heard you say that you have lots of programs all the way going back. I think you said that you didn't have the program for your first ever
No, I
game,
couldn't
but I've
find
got some
it.
news for you.
Oh, look
I
at that.
have tracked it down, and I'm
Oh,
going to send this to you as a
oh,
thank
thank
you
you.
for your time today. So
That's
there he
Brian
is,
Horton, isn't
Brian
it? That,
Horton on the
Brian Horton,
front. Yeah,
yes. I
April
wonder
the
who they're
1st.
playing there. Look, that looks like
Ooh.
sort of Blackpool or somebody,
It's
doesn't
a
it? Oh,
yellow
thank you. That's
kit,
really kind.
yellow and
Yeah.
blue.
How
Who
much is the
knows? But
program there, Richard? Is it what is it? 10p? Probably is.
it is 15p. 15p. Official program.
Official.
15p.
Oh, you're very
But
kind. Thank you, Richard. Thank you
yeah,
very much. I have to
it's
say, I
been
have got this will make you laugh. I have got the program from the England game, the Norway
okay.
game, and you turn over on the back. It's an enormous advert for Rothman cigarettes.
Yeah, some of the ads in here you probably wouldn't see again. But yeah. Anyway, as I say, been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time. And
My pleasure.
the podcast will be coming out very shortly. So look out for it, and look forward to talking to you again soon.